that. But that's a kind of thing that is starting to happen.
Very good.
I had a quick, if I
please.
may.
Go ahead, please.
Is that okay?
Of course, of course.
Just to bring the conversation to a little bit micro from the macro problems that overwhelm us. I think last week there was a news item about one of the telecom tower companies, I think it was Viome, that had a press release that they are building a business model and a infrastructure around the tower which would supply a limited power to the village in terms of very limited services in health and maybe a school or a post office. I was just curious if any of the panel members had tracked that and had any comments. What are they thinking? What's the business model or what's the infrastructure that they're leveraging and providing it to the village?
YM is also part of THIPA. Okay.
It's all part of the same.
So it's all part of THIPA group, and everybody is trying to make the similar model so that, I mean, nobody has rolled out yet, let me tell you, but there are opportunities. People are looking around how exactly it has to be made. And also, the devotee requirement which has come right now to go green, that also, makes the things little more easier, because the business will also focus towards, how do we make it more green and at the same time serve the community.
Just as a follow-up to that question, if it's coming from, what's the name of the organization you said?
THIPA.
THIPA, okay. I was just curious if there is a policy level business model or energy model that's being developed which can be adopted by the towers to provide this sort of a distributed power generation and distribution model for the village.
It's under evolving stage. Okay, so it's something like everybody has to agree on, and it should be business-wise viable. Ultimately business is there to make some money and at the same time to serve the community because we are making money. So I think it is doing both. Shortly it will be, out.
Can I just
So
add a,
can
sorry,
I just,
a little bit of a lighter note on this whole thing? My personal belief, having been around for a long time in India, is that you follow 100% of the rules, you end up breaking 50% of the rules, because they contradict. So when you go down this community path and all, there are rules which prevent you from selling power.
Correct.
So you got to be. So there'll be many roadblocks, but we will get through them.
You can sell fuel.
yeah. So I just want to point out at the policy level, the Rural Electric Supply Company policy exists. I'm a part of Universal Service Fund, advisor to Universal, part of the advisory committee. The Universal Service Fund is looking at how do you really leverage towers and to start providing power. Unfortunately, one of the key problems that I am finding is that most people still looking at in terms of subsidy and how do they tap certain government subsidy to do something. My own feeling is that we need to try to make a viable economic business plan working in that area. Now, if that doesn't work and falls short by 5%, 10% for a short-term subsidy is needed, it's okay. But when it is done primarily to get subsidy, then it just ends up getting subsidy and not serving any purpose.
Thank you.
Okay. Sir, you had a question. Yeah. Go ahead, please. The checker, sir.
Motivation for GreenTouch seemed like coming from Asia, actually, because looks like in US at least the labor seems to be the higher cost of the OPEX, right? So the cost of the power, 70% to that number was coming from Asia. But on the contrary, if you look at the presenters who have given the Indian context, the solution does not seem to be coming from the optimization of the network, but more in terms of looking at other areas which are completely. So my question is really where is the motivation for continuing research and continuing, so should we look at this as a more of a power issue, or should we look at it more like a capacity issue? So what do we look at it as?
Let me point this out, a very simple thing. I think somebody else may be able to correct me. About 3 years back, we were able to make the base station move, BTS completely move away from a shelter to the tower, which basically means that BTS no longer needed an air conditioner. Now that did not happen because of either the photovoltaics or just happened because of the kind of things that was talked about from morning, reducing the power consumption in the BTS and ensuring that it can continue to work at 55 degrees centigrade. So I think the point that was made by her also, that if you can actually design systems which require less and less of cooling, can work at 55 degrees centigrade, then, but you need to keep that in mind. You not only have to require less and less of cooling, less and less power consumption, less and less of cooling, and working at 55 degrees centigrade. That's a key requirement. If you add that to any, of course, if you don't reduce the power emitted, if you keep on transmitting, using as much power in the BTS, then probably you'll require air conditioning, and then probably all the other problems will come. So I think the work that is being done by many people has a certain important component. What we have tried to sort of do sort of say that yes, that may be something that we can have in future, but we need to also solve the current problem. And even in future, we have to keep a watch all the time that as soon as we bring in cooling, as soon as we bring in power conditioning, the cost will keep on going up. And we need to bring in the power conditioning and cooling and things like that. Systems has to be built in that manner. I'll give you an example. We built an ATM machine. IIT Madras built an ATM machine which today is being installed in a village. It consumes 5 times less power than a normal ATM machine. Simply because we use the kind of learnings that we learned in Telecom. We'll shut down whenever we don't need it. Very simple. We then said that, well, with all that, the power consumption goes so much that you don't need air conditioning. You don't need air conditioning, and then we ensured that the power, because anyway, much of the things work on DC and low power DC. So we could build a appropriate air conditioner. So even if the voltage falls down to 110 volts, it doesn't really matter. Once we build equipment of this kind, the problem gets tremendously solved. So the work that is being done, theoretical work, and the focus on equipment making for countries like India will become very important.
Please, yes.
Wait, because I want to add a slightly different perspective, because I think part of the question was related to the United States and others. And in the United States, ATM machines dispense cash, not as a switch. So and when you sleep, it's always being used. So I don't know if there's a lot of sleep time. But in the United States and other places, even though from an OpEx perspective, energy is not the dominant source, labor is, there's no operator in the United States or in Europe that could take a factor of 5, take a factor of 10 increase in that expense and stay positive, because margins are challenged all over the globe, and razor thin on each of these things, and they just cannot take the hit.
Good morning, Professor Jamadagni was mentioning that there are going to be green targets given to all telecom devices. So my question is, the targets that the government is planning to give to telcos, are they feasible technically, logistically, and so on? Second thing is, like, is green telco, whatever the talk going on, is it like electric cars or whatever? We have been reading about it for many years, but I don't see electric cars at a large scale. So it is good to read maybe a few models here and there, but large scale deployments don't happen. So will that scenario hit the telcos here? And the key technical challenges, are we there? Are we there to actually do this large scale, cope up with the thing? Or are we going to have a major, it'll stabilize at some stage and no more improvements can happen and we'll have to live with that? Is that going to happen?
I'll try that. Well, I think that electric cars, I'm not an expert in electric cars, but my understanding is that the battery technology is still the key issue there. GreenTouch, I think, is making good technology improvements like the ones that you've heard about today that are moving forward. I think we're fortunate that we can with quite a few of these electronic and optical technologies that are used in the network, make advances faster than people have been able to make in terms of battery power for electric cars. So I'm optimistic that the kinds of goals that GreenTouch has set itself are realistic. It will involve, but they're tough and they're bold. One thing that no one has mentioned yet is the fact that a lot of the GreenTouch innovations are likely to go beyond current standards, and so there will need to be a lot of work done on standards if they're ever to become realistic or used in practical systems. And GreenTouch is not particularly concerning itself with standards, and it's something we recognise will have to be dealt with later on. But I think at a technical level, there's good optimism in GreenTouch that those goals can be met.
Because actually what you do see is where electric cars, while technically feasible, we just spent the previous hour talking about, with a grid that goes off, charging the car could be a real problem. In other countries where you can charge them fairly easy, the gas and fuel costs are relatively small compared to the expense. And so you get into this dichotomy with the specific electric car. But what you do see becoming extremely popular is hybrid vehicles, where fuel is the main energy source because it's easily distributed and whatnot. But then, of course, it's translated into hydroelectric, and so you can optimize the car combustion engine to do this very, very rapidly. And so that technology is taking off all over.
Just since the topic suddenly turned to wonderful electric cars, have you heard of a guy called Shai Agassi? He runs something called Better Places. And he sold his company some years ago.
He's a Israeli guy, right? Yeah.
So he said he says, I learned from the telecom industry that you got to treat the electric car, like you have mobile minutes. So he's actually implementing this in all of Israel, where he's saying the battery will be rented on, like you have a talk time, you have a battery time. But he's the whole country, so you just go to a place, because your real problem is that when your battery runs out, you need 8 hours to charge. Change the battery. So, but that infrastructure, like you have oil pumps, you need to set up that entire set of infrastructure. Go to this website and see, it's fabulous experiment going on there. But he says he learned it from the telecom industry, so there is something good in this.
Yeah, please go. Yeah, yourself.
The telecom, the government policy towards towers.
It's okay, you just stand up and speak.
Okay, first of all, I want to tell you that, in any field, the innovation will never stop. It's like an avalanche, it will just continue. If something you think that you have completed, there is another one which is already awaiting you, okay? So that's one part of it. The second part of it is, Indus, we are looking at the DOT requirement documents, and it is not really easy to meet, because in Europe and other countries, they have taken approximately 15 to 18 years to reach the carbon footprint down. And what we are talking today is, the norm says some 5% by 2013. So it's a very big target, okay? So there's a lot of dialogue going on between the government and the government associated bodies. How do we really try to see, is there any way it can be made viable? That is one part of it. The second part of it, having said that, we are also, as all of us are conscious about the environment and all, we are also trying to get a sort of measure on where do we stand on our carbon footprint. So that's an activity ongoing on in many of the, operators level as well as the tower level, in order to understand where do we stand on. So that's a baseline. Once you fix a baseline, then the question comes, how do we go about it?
Yeah, I just want to add, since I was on the other side trying to draft that policy. So, I do think that efforts are required, but our targets are not something that are too steep. Indian operators will meet it.